Let's call the meeting to order. We have our council members in place, so we will call the special meeting of the city council to order. And maybe to get their attention, shall we have roll call?
You need a gavel, sir.
I know. We'll have roll call.
All right. Mayor Wolgass?
Here.
Council members Hiller?
Here.
Clear?
Here.
Ortiz? Emerson?
Here.
De La Isla?
Here.
Jensen?
Present.
Schwartz? Cohen? And Harmon.
Here.
Oh my. Deputy Mayor Cohen is out of town on business, and Councilwoman Schwartz is ill, will not be here this evening. So we will be going with the 8 of us. We have our agenda for us, if you all have that. I think we received a couple handouts. On top should be the agenda, and then the other items they'll go to, they will give us the background as we get to them. You received a copy of the minutes of the meeting last Wednesday, June the 7th, a week ago tonight. If you've had time to review those, is there any corrections, additions, or a motion to approve? Councilman Emerson.
I move approval.
Moves approval.
Second.
Councilwoman Clear seconds, as does Councilman Jensen. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay.
I have 7 yes.
7 having voted yes, the minutes are approved as printed and sent to us. For opening comments, I will then yield to the interim city manager and/or the financial staff for their comments.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Nick Hawkins with the Budget Office. If you're okay, I'm just going to walk through the agenda really quick, and then we'll get right into it. The first, what you have in front of you are, as part of your packet, you have the supplements 2 and 3, which were questions, which were some email questions from last week, as well as questions that came up during the department budget presentations and our meeting last Wednesday. I am happy to go over any of those with you. The one that I will point out, and you have another separate handout with you that starts with Public Works. There was a question about forestry employees, and what we found, there was a little bit of a mix-up in the employee count, and someone from parking was in forestry. So what you have in front of you is just a corrected personnel sheet that shows that 9 employees in parking, or 9 employees in forestry, 14 in parking. And that's correct, and those are the same as the 2017 levels.
Okay,
So there were no changes
all right.
to the.
Under your agenda, first was the minutes.
Yes.
Then you have supplement 2, which is the questions, Q&A,
Yes.
responses that were asked about maybe that second, or whatever, first,
Yes.
second meeting that they received. So if you just page through those, if there are any questions that you may have, and you can then proceed. Supplement 3, which is the most recent one from the questions from last Wednesday, from June the 7th. And I know that had the parking rates, the billing system for utilities. There it started the enhancement programs, and then it went into the Public Works Forestry Division, Appendix A there, also providing more background. See no questions? I know you're all up top of this. And then also there, as Nick just mentioned, the Public Works.
Correct.
That's going to
The
go into that
corrected
tonight.
budget pages
Okay.
for the forestry and the parking FTEs. Those have been
Okay, so
corrected.
these are sort of revised or
Yes.
corrected pages we should put in our books for Public Works. That's all Public Works, correct, in
Yes.
this section? And then the personnel history, this is the one that corrects that other
Correct.
misstatement,
Yes.
all right?
Your Honor, if I might, is
Yes.
that been updated on the PDF on the website?
It has been.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Again, I struggle
Good
to
point.
insert paper into my computer,
Right. Okay.
but I'm happy to go download a new PDF.
All right, we're together on all the handouts. Okay? Go ahead.
If there are no questions, the next item that we have on our agenda is to go through a number of funds that we haven't gotten to in our previous meetings. We have a special call out for the motor fuel, the streets fund, as well as the health fund, and we'll have directors of each of those departments come up and speak to those funds. And then I will go through some of the other funds in the back of the book, and we can field questions from there. And after that, will be a discussion on amendments, and we're proposing having a break after we discuss the other funds before we jump into that point.
All right.
So with that, I believe the first fund on here is the motor fuel fund, and Jason Peak.
Okay, we're on to
Director of
5A
Public
on the
Works will-
agenda, motor fuel funds, and that is on page,
That is on page 102, yes.
page 102.
Good evening, governing body. I'm here to talk to you about the motor fuel fund. This motor fuel fund funds basically our street operations division within Public Works. The motor fuel fund is funded through gas tax receipts remitted basically to the local government. Within this fund, I just kind of want to highlight basically the services it provides. About 47% of this budget goes directly into our street maintenance activities. This includes the pothole patching, crack sealing, concrete pavement repairs, and even some of the small brick street patching that we do within our brick streets. This fund also supports our street sweeping activities, the sweeping that we do throughout the city. That's about 16% of this budget. This fund also supports alley maintenance, the maintenance that we do on aggregate alleys as well as paved alleys, and that represents a little over 13% of the budget. It also funds our winter snow removal operations or de-icing operations that we do when we have inclement weather. On an average year, that's about 10% of the budget, but that can be as much as 20% of the operating budget during several severe winter events in that year. The balance of the fund is made up through other services that we may get called in, debris removal. We do stone curb replacement or small construction projects, retaining walls, other things within the right-of-way that kind of make up the balance of that. And then also within the fund this year, we added $750,000 for pavement rehabilitation. And that basically came by budgeting out of the fund balance into this fund. And so that's just kind of a broad overview of what we do, and I'd stand for any questions that you may have.
One question, and this goes more to the finance staff. How, we hear stories of this being stable or going down, or because it's based on gasoline usage, totally. So do you have any thoughts on that? Or I see by what I look here, it looks like it's reasonably stable, but certainly not increasing. It varies a little bit year by year.
Mr. Mayor, I think that's accurate. At least in my tenure here, this has been reasonably stable. I think from a political perspective, that has been a little less uncertain. There's concerns every year that these monies may disappear and that it may be part of the state's budget solution. I think every year that I've been here and other places I've worked, that's always been a discussion as to whether or not and how we can protect these funds. Again, that was not part of the budget solution this year, so that's not a worry again for 2018. I would say that has partly contributed to the fund balance building up a little bit, as there has been that ongoing concern that the monies might not be there and we needed to sort of save them for a rainy day. But this is, as Mr. Peak noted, this is one of the places where we look to find that $2 million towards streets. use 750,000 of the fund balance.
So the proposed ending balance is less, significantly less in 18.
Correct.
Showing
If
that.
you look at it, it's still a very healthy balance in terms
Yeah.
of the fund balance versus percentage of revenues or percentage of expenditures. We still feel like it's a very healthy balance and within the parameters of any policies we might have.
And the snow removal season can fall into 2 fiscal years.
Thank
So
you.
another-
That's a wonderful reminder. We have this discussion every year. We had obviously a mild start to this year, but you never know what the end of the year might bring. If we're fortunate, it'll be another mild snow season for us in terms of roads. That brings other issues, but at least for our road crew, that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Other questions on motor fuels? Councilman
you.
Jensen?
Have you all been able to do any sort of forecasting on the long-term trend of converting to electric vehicles and how that hasn't affected a whole lot in the recent past, but that seems to be the trend that the country is going to, and vehicles that consume less fuel. So in our long-term planning, are we looking to sort of move beyond a fuels tax funding mechanism for some of this? Or is the thought that at some point there'll be some other funding mechanism that'll come in to make up the difference?
Councilmember, I'd say two things. First off, as noted, the revenue source has been relatively stable, even with that trend. I would say that we haven't analyzed it specifically, but I would say Kansas is probably less accepting of that trend. That I don't have the numbers to back that up, but that's just my sense. But the second part of the answer I would give is that is part of the reason we wanted to get funds into the general fund this year specifically dedicated to street maintenance. It's something that we've wanted to see since Ms. Lee and I have worked towards since we've gotten here. We really feel like there should be some dedicated funds in the general fund that are generally tax supported towards road maintenance, and we think this is a good step.
Okay, good. And I agree, and I think typically most cities, at least our size, do put some general fund money into street maintenance. You're nodding.
No
so
question. That's
affirmative.
correct, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, okay, thank you. Councilman Ortiz?
Thank you. We used to, Mr. Mayor. We
Yeah, I
took it
know.
out when
Yes.
that economy hit. We had to do what we had to do. I feel like you're way back there, so, anyway. I guess I'm always confused because I know when we talk about the snow removal, the money for the snow removal, we always try to keep it until the next year or keep a portion of that. Is that correct in case? Because the fiscal year goes through, didn't you tell me this, Jason, from December, ends in December? So we always try to make sure we have enough money for January and February or the next following month?
So if I can recollect the conversation, I think what you're referencing is our stock, basically our salt and de-icing material that we
Well,
keep.
no, what I'm saying is a lot of people think, and I understand where they're coming from, that, we've had a light winter for the last 2-3 years. And so it just seems like there should be a lot of money left over because we're not buying what we, the supplies that we need and stuff. But I can't remember if you or Doug told me that we kind of keep that money in reserve or for the
So-
next year because we have, January, February.
Yes, ma'am. So we do try to keep within that fund balance, that reserve, because we have 2 fluctuations within a snow event. Depending on the length of event is our labor cost, so just physically the amount of
Right.
time. And when we get into a big storm event, the amount of overtime, as we're rotating people through. So that's one variable. The other is just having a ready supply of material on hand. I mean, the de-icing material and stuff that we use, it's not something that you just go and buy and it's here tomorrow. There's kind of a lead time on that material. So if we have an event and that stock supply goes down, we go ahead and issue purchase orders after the event, basically to bring that stock supply back up to a level, so we're prepared for that next event. And so what you can see happening is at the end of a budget cycle, we're not having that weather event. We may be increasing that supply as we get into the winter. So spending that money to basically resupply our de-icing material.
Do you know how much money we hold back for that, or how do we calculate?
So I
that?
just give you example, the de-icing event that we had, or I'm sorry, not de-icing, the ice event that we had earlier this year, I believe it was February, we spent about $300,000 on de-icing material. So I mean, it's a couple of things to think about. When we have these ice events, we're trying to prevent freezing on the roads. When we have a snow event, we're plowing and removing, so there's a higher labor cost if we don't have a lot of ice. But these de-icing events, the material that we put it out, it melts, we may get some rain, wash it out, got another de-icing. That cycling of events can consume a lot more material than, say, a snow event where we're plowing and pushing that material to the side.
So how much does 300,000 buy us, and is that a year's worth of?
I don't have the exact tonnage. I could get you that information, but typically we budget around between $600,000 to $800,000 annually for the resupply of icing material.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other questions on motor fuels? Seeing none, health?
Yes, and Jackie Russell, Director of Human Resources, will come up and discuss that. And you can find that fund on page 195 of your book.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Want to just kind of give you a brief overview of the health fund and the proposed changes in 2018. This budget does include approximately a 15% overall increase in premiums over 2017. That is attributed to increased claims expense and associated stop-loss premiums based on having had the insurance have to pay some of our claims. There is also increased cost of medical services of approximately 6% that we've incurred, and prescription drug expenses anticipated to increase about 15%. We do have some enhancements to our health plan design that are contractual with our cost share agreement with our 7 bargaining units that will impact 2018. There is a 10% reduction in deductibles, and the city contributions toward the dependent tiers will increase by 3%. Also, our clinic fees, the clinic is operated by HealthStat, is contractually increasing by 4%. So those are factors into that 15% increase that you're looking at in the budget. We receive our formal renewal from Blue Cross Blue Shield about mid-July. So what is budgeted here is an estimate. Blue Cross provides a renewal based on our anticipated claims expense, administrative fees, and then stop-loss premium. Stop-loss premium is a insurance that we purchase to protect the city from excess liability and claims. So we purchase 2 types of stop-loss. One for individual claims that are in excess of $150,000. That's the first level of stop-loss. The second level of stop-loss is for if our entire claims go more than 20% of what Blue Cross Blue Shield anticipates. For the years 2015 and 16, our group exceeded that stop loss for the entire group. That's called aggregate stop loss. In the plan year 2016, Blue Cross Blue Shield paid $2,120,275 in claims expense through stop loss. To kind of give you a ballpark, our anticipated 2017 stop-loss premium is $770,000. So we are significantly ahead by purchasing that stop-loss insurance. That was implemented after the fund went broke in 2011 to protect the city from extreme liabilities. So based on the continuing increases in our health expenses, I also wanted to share with you kind of our focus areas and some rationale of what we're trying to do. We are continuing to work with our pharmacy benefit provider to identify ways that we can help curb the ever-increasing cost of prescription drugs. We are trying to increase our employees' engagement and overall well-being and improving their health through wellness initiatives, such as the 2018 Wellness Incentive, which is kind of outcomes-based. It's not just participation. There is criteria for meeting certain biometric screening levels or entering into alternative accommodations to help with conditions such as high blood pressure, diabetes, to try to stabilize those conditions. Generally trying to infuse more of a health and well-being culture into the work environment. Those things will hopefully help with our health risk staying where it is and not increasing, and helping our employees better manage their chronic conditions to prevent hospitalization claims. Employees that do choose to participate in our 2018 Wellness Incentive, if they are enrolled in the employee only, they will receive a 15% discount off of the employee base plan premium. If they have dependents enrolled, spouses or children, they will receive a 10% discount off of the premium for achieving those wellness incentive criteria. So that's a quick, fast overview, and I would certainly stand for any questions if you have any.
Are there questions? Councilwoman Clear?
Can you give a ballpark, like what that means to the average city employee, how much their insurance will premium, they, out of pocket, what they're gonna have to pay, how much more?
Well, I can't give you a very good ballpark simply because we don't have the renewal yet. But
So based on the 15?
the non-wellness premium for employee only right now is $60. So 15% on top of that would be a ballpark estimate as an apples to apples comparison. And then they have an opportunity to reduce that by 15% if they participate in the wellness incentive. So
But the city's gonna pay, what was the city gonna do with the 3%?
that is for the increase in our contribution from 60% of the dependent tiers to the city will pay 63% in 2018. So what we've been trying to do also is make sure that our benefit programs are attractive to quality employees and retaining quality employees, and trying to move the amount that we pay towards dependent tiers closer to the benchmark of comparable agencies, which is about 75 to 80%. So we're a bit behind and gradually trying to move that up to be more mainstream.
I see, thank you.
Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jackie, I noticed in the 2017 budget, your expenses are to the dollar, the same as the anticipated revenue. Is that just being, are you just being conservative and thinking we'll pay out all the way, total claims?
And I might defer to finance, but I think that's revenue is based off of the anticipated expenses. So it is kind of a wash.
What I would say generally when we set this is that you can kind of take either approach. So like in the 15 and 16, as you can see, the revenues and the expenses, they're never going to match perfectly because of where it comes in. I think in the 17 budget at the time that we were discussing this, as I remember before we did the final budget, we actually had our renewals in because we did it 2 to 3 weeks later. So I think we knew more at this point, looking back at this point last year. So for 18, kind of to Jackie's point about where the final numbers will come in, that because we moved the whole process up a few weeks, we really don't have as good of a handle on that. Really with the overall revenue and expenses number, they kind of end up being what they are. I mean, they're really based on renewal. Sure. We're obligated with the employees and with our benefits. So of course those numbers are going to fluctuate quite a bit. But I believe that's kind of the reason for the difference.
Any idea how we are right now? How we're trending this year thus far?
So thus far through the first quarter, we've only had 2 large claims so far, and we are doing much better so far than we have been the last 2 years. So we hope that we're back in the positive swing of things, kind of ebbs and flows with self-funding.
Sure. Thank you.
Councilman Jensen?
Thank you. Does our stop-loss insurance premium skyrocket when we use that? And over the course of time, if we budget better with those claims, would we expect to see that come down and realize some savings?
So we don't necessarily budget for our claims. We receive the anticipated claims expense directly from Blue Cross, and they also underwrite the stop-loss insurance at a 20% corridor above those expected claims. It does anticipate to have an impact on the next year's premiums. And in working with our benefits consultants, Willis Towers Watson, they're anticipating about a 10% increase in our stop-loss premium based on our recent experience. And so that is built into this budget.
So we're basically relying on them to give us information, and then we exceed the information that they provide, and then they expect us to pay more. I see a conflict of interest here.
Well, they've paid out significantly more in claims than we have paid in
And that's-
insurance. So to date, we've been in a better place than prior to us having that.
And that's true, and I don't disagree with the need to purchase that. I'm just wondering if they're telling us we need 20 million and we keep consistently spending above that, then perhaps we should say, yes, you've said 20 million, but our history indicates we're probably going to do 23 million, so it's always better to plan for more and not have to rely on insurance, because those premiums are going to continue to skyrocket anyway. At some point, there's a balance, and I just want to make sure we're being cognizant of that balance, because if we cannot use those premiums or we don't have to, then they're not going to continue to go up 10% every year.
We have a limited amount of flexibility with Blue Cross Blue Shield as our administrator for our claims, because they kind of manage that entire process. It is a conversation that we do have periodically with Willis Towers Watson, and we do go out for requests for proposals every 5 years for our administrators. Something that we do also evaluate at that time is whether or not it makes sense to stay where we are or look at a third-party administrator. In a third-party administrator role, we could then have more say in that estimate, as well as purchasing where we purchase that stop-loss coverage from. But at this point, Prime is the company that Blue Cross uses, and they handle all of that as the administrator. So it's absolutely something that we do look at each time we go out for bid.
And which year are we in now?
We, actually, we have 2 more renewals in this,
Okay.
before we would go out for bid.
Thank you.
Councilwoman D'Elisla.
Are we at risk, should we have to do this several times, of losing the ability to have that type of coverage?
We are not at risk. The premium increase, I guess the risk is if that benefit analysis, if it would become cost prohibitive.
When you talk to new employees coming into the city or considering a job with us, some from management to different levels, and the health insurance is always a pretty big item in making decisions about jobs. What type of feedback do you have on our plan? Pretend there's nobody else back there in the room and you're just talking to us. Are we competitive?
We have some room to grow competitively. I would tell you that over the last few years, we have gotten more competitive, as our plan took higher deductibles much earlier than many organizations did, and over the last 5 or so years, they have started to catch up with us. Our clinic is very attractive to new employees, and having that as an option for convenience of acute conditions, as well as to help manage their ongoing chronic diseases. And as we are improving the percentage that we pay on the dependent tiers, that's the biggest feedback that we have received in our recruitment processes, is that it is more expensive to insure families, and so that's why we've had that targeted focus.
Okay, good, thank you. Councilman Hiller?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure exactly who to direct this to, so I'll give it the pieces and you all can figure it out. Could you talk for a moment about our wellness center and how many of our employees are using it today, and whether there are benefits elsewhere in the budget for any groups of employees to use that we're paying for other wellness, or the opportunity to join a gym or get that experience someplace else?
So I don't have the exact numbers with me tonight relating to the fitness center, but I'd be happy to get that information and follow up with you. The budgeted expenses are included in the human resources budget, and that is a pretty lean budget. Actually, half of the salary of the wellness coordinator is in this health fund budget, and half of it is in the HR budget. And if you see here, for the 2018, that compensation, $30,895 is half of the salary and benefits for the wellness coordinator. And the other half of that is included in the compensation line item in the health, and in the HR budget. And then there is $5,000 in the recreational line item of the HR budget, and that is the money that goes towards the fitness center.
I'll watch for a follow-up. It sounds like it's in lots of places. I mean, because we're paying for that facility and the equipment and all of that, right?
Much of that equipment is been purchased over years. So, for example, like that Nautilus equipment, the weights that are down there are probably 20-plus years old. There's not any, we might have periodic maintenance, but most of that is done internally by the wellness coordinator as far as the regular routine maintenance. If there's a part or something occasionally, that's from that $5,000 that's in the HR budget, and they may use that to purchase a piece or two of equipment as there is money available.
So I was thinking you did an upgrade last year.
There was some equipment purchased not out of the budget last year for a treadmill and a elliptical, and I believe one other weight item. And we took out a piece that was actually from the early 1980s because of safety concerns.
Okay.
And are there any other places in the budget where people can have an allowance for using a fitness center someplace else?
We're all looking at each other and thinking, no, it's not something we recollect
Okay.
anywhere in the budget, so I don't think there is.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Jackie, I'm glad that you brought that up. I think we would have more participation in the wellness center if our equipment was more up to date. And I know that the classes are good and people go down and participate, but those machines are very, very old. And they just, make it work, Is there any room in the budget that allows them to get new equipment?
If I could, I would say that over the last 3 or 4 years, we have really made a concerted effort in upgrading the equipment that's down there. All of the equipment that's down there is 100% fully functional. And if there's been best practices that show certain outdated pieces have a risk of injury associated with them, we have removed them. And so I invite all of you to come down and take a look at what's down there. It's actually pretty impressive what we've been able to do with the very limited funding that we do use. And we have tried to focus more on equipment than classes. We've moved away from all contracted instructors over the last 5 or so years to put money into the equipment.
But what I'm saying is, Chris is an instructor. She goes to the Capitol, she holds classes. And I think since we have employed her, I think it'd be great to bring some of those classes because she's one of our employees. But at some point in time, we've got to get new equipment because that's the complaint that I hear is the equipment is outdated. So when you're going to the gyms, and I know we haven't had any money in the budget, I'm just bringing this to light. When you go to different new gyms, the equipment's so much nicer, and I think that's something that we really need to look at if we really want our employees to come down and be a part of the wellness.
Understood.
Other questions on health? Okay, that concludes the item. And then item C is summary of other funds. And Nick sent out the list today.
Yes.
There are 19 other funds.
Yes.
So I think I'm suggesting we sort of page through those and you comment unless there's a question, or so we can move right along.
Yes,
Then-
and generally these start on page 127. Actually, the first fund I'm going to talk about starts on page 131. And we'll go through, skip a few that we've already talked about as part of department budget presentations and other and other workshops that we've had.
Okay, everybody, page 132, we're going to move along.
Yep. So I will give brief overviews of these, and then if there are any questions, we can go through them. So the first one is the Alcohol and Drug Safety Fund on page 131. And this fund is funded by fees from certain convictions and diversions of criminal proceedings. It pays for one certified staff member to teach alcohol classes and manage cases. It includes a 10% contingency based off of the beginning fund balance for 2018. And really, it's a fairly flat budget. It's stayed relatively stable for the past couple of years. So, any
And we're
questions?
mandated to do this. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I believe so.
You know, this is one of those court fees, and by
Yes.
law, this, we have to do this, so that's how it's done. Councilwoman Claire?
It's just for informational purposes. Where is a certified staff member at? Where do they teach these classes at?
There, we have someone approaching who can answer the question, I think.
Good evening, Councilwoman Claire. This is an actual probation officer 1 position that's located in the probation office. There are 4 staff members there. We have a probation officer 2 and 2 probation officer 1s, and a support staff member who is a office assistant 3.
And
That's who
their
teaches?
yeah, the physical location is,
The probation office, 2nd floor of City Hall.
And that's where they teach the classes?
The classes are actually held in the 1st floor conference room. It's twice a month, and that's for Alcohol Information School. It's split up in 2 different classes. And both probation officer 1s actually do teach a class, but only one is paid from this fund.
Okay.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Other questions? Oh, next.
Okay, on page 133, you'll find the Special Alcohol Fund. This is, constitutes 1/3 of the special tax on the sale of alcoholic beverages in private clubs. It is actually a pass-through to the Topeka Shawnee County Alcohol Drug Abuse Advisory Council, and it can only be used for services or programs for prevention, education, or treatment of alcohol or drug abuse. And they'll give these funds to certain programs. I think the Boys and Girls Club has received funds in the past to, or I think they're one of the 2017 recipients to teach like prevention to youth. So it's a lot of different classes on prevention and treatment.
Questions? Seeing none?
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Nick, on that, I see we used to have like a $300,000 balance, and every year it's going down, and in 2018, I guess I don't know what to make of it, because every year it's went down like $100,000, and then in 2018, it doesn't change at all.
Yes, we've been spending down the cash balance on that. And so in 2018, that cash balance will actually be pretty close to exhausted. And so we are just passing through what we expect to receive from the tax, from that 1/3 of the tax.
Okay, from here on, so you have been actually giving more money than we're taking in the past
Yes,
few years?
due to the cash balance. And this is a pass-through payment
Okay.
to the counties.
Yes,
In
if
the
you
future,
had, if we'd shown actuals back through, probably going back to 2010, you'd see that there was a history of a couple years we weren't granting out, and for whatever reason, I'm not sure if they just picked a set dollar amount every year and then they just weren't granting it out, or perhaps some of you know more history on that, but we hadn't been granting out as much as we received, so we decided for a couple years to make a concerted effort to get that money into the community, because there's no reason you wouldn't spend it all on these programs. So now we're at a place where every year from here going forward, we'd pretty much be flat. Whatever we get in is what we're going to grant out.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Hiller?
Just a quick comment, thinking of our kind of extended conversation yesterday about social service grants. When we look at how much, these are going to some significant nonprofit agencies that are doing some tremendous programming in town. And when we look at how much money we as a city are investing in social services, you take the money that we went through yesterday, which is still at about $600,000, you add this to it at $535, And then the two funds that we have that pay utility bills, the Roundup money, which is donated, and the money that we have, the franchise fee money. And it's when you put, they're in different places, but it's when you put those all together, you get about $1.2 or $3 million that we're investing in social services. Just, that's it, just a comment.
Next.
Page 135 is the Law Enforcement Fund. And these funds are received from various sources. They can only be used for law enforcement purposes, and they're administered by the Topeka Police Department for uses that are including narcotic-related enforcement and training, crime prevention, and training for academy students. And this budget has actually remained flat from 2017. And there are various types. It kind of depends on the year on what the police department gives it to, but it could be to certain agencies. One thing that has been used in the past is sponsoring neighborhoods as part of National Night Out. So it's different things like that. We get money from the state on occasion for the training academy to train police officers. So it's a lot of different uses within this fund.
All right, questions? Councilwoman Claire?
Okay, I'd asked you earlier about the $55,000 for the crime prevention. It says that Safe Streets, they give to Safe Streets, but we also have a social services grant for Safe Streets. So can you tell me how much they've gotten in the past? Seems like we're doubling up.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, city manager, and staff. The answer to that question is they've gotten $6,000, but it doesn't actually go, it doesn't stay with them. They're basically just issuing it out to neighborhoods for National Night Out. That money covers 60 neighborhoods. I believe it's on a first come, first served basis, and each neighborhood gets $100 of that funding. So Safe Streets keeps none of that money. They just help by connecting us directly with the neighborhoods without us having to actually accept applications, and they handle all that, so they don't keep any of that funding.
And that's okay, as long as they don't say in their grant that they need money to do that. And I'd have to go back and look at Safe Streets grant to see if they said, we need $6,000 to give to neighborhoods, so.
I believe that they probably help more than that number of neighborhoods. I know they get some funding from some other agencies too. I believe that with the funding that they get from us and a couple other agencies, they give up to 60 neighborhoods $250. But I know that they do get more neighborhoods than that. So if there is any funding that they're asking for, and I'm not sure on that one, it might be to do additional neighborhoods.
So you give it for 60 neighborhoods, $100 each?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Jensen?
There's also no administration costs that we pay Safe Streets to administer this fund for us, is there?
No.
So if we didn't give them additional money to manage this, then they would have no ability to do that for us. So it's helpful to know when you give somebody money but don't give them the ability to manage that money. So they would need a different funding source from us as well to help with that. So.
And it is very helpful, again, for us to not have to have all the neighborhoods come directly to us, because then that would take
takes a lot of coordination.
staffing.
I've been to some of those meetings, and they do an excellent job at managing a herd of cats.
Yeah, yes. Other questions on the law enforcement fund? Seeing none, proceed.
Okay, page 137 is the Special Liability Fund. This fund is supported by the mill levy and includes 3.5 employees, and basically just pays for the city's legal settlements. And so that can vary based on the year, but we budget close to the full amount just for the possibility of claims that will be coming up in the upcoming year.
Okay, questions? Okay, proceed.
Page 141, so jumping over the TGT fund, since that was discussed yesterday. Page 141 is the Retirement and Reserve Fund. And this is funding for accrued sick, vacation, and other costs to employees upon retirement and separation. In 2018, the rate is higher due to the exhaustion of bonded funds for retirement payouts. We've exceeded, I believe, exhausted the $5 million from, I forget which year that was, 2013, I believe. And those funds have been exhausted, and so now we are increasing the rate in order to keep up with payments for those retirees and separations.
And therefore, you do not budget this out of the departments individually?
Correct.
Departments? Okay, all right. Questions, Councilwoman Ortiz?
How do we determine the amount? Do we look at how many, how do we determine that?
So what we do is we sit with HR every year and work with them on estimates. They usually, when employees are retiring, they get a heads up on, of course, you don't really know until employees finally announce that, but they have a general idea if they've had employees that are hitting a certain age. They know at any given point who's Social Security eligible, who might have the points to retire. And so every year we review all of that and pretty much kind of assume if everybody went tomorrow that could, what would that cost us? Plus, as you can see in this fund, we budget the whole contingency just to anticipate if in 18, everybody that could retire did retire, and then for some reason a lot of people separated, it gives us flexibility that we could then pay that out. So once we work with them to figure out who might be retiring, what kind of benefits might they have at the end of their retirement, then we back into the rate that we need to charge ourselves to get revenue into the fund.
Okay, other questions? Seeing that, Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you. I was here when this happened. Is the bottom line the bond payment?
So what we do is we actually, when we first went out for the bonds, we have an arrangement to transfer in $250,000 from the retirement reserve fund into the debt service fund to cover the debt payment.
Is that all it is, $250,000 a year?
I'll have to double check on what the exact split is. I mean, it was
I thought we
its own
didn't borrow the money
series.
for all that long. I hope not. My recollection was it was a very short term.
Yeah, and I want to be able to tell you 100% that yes, it's a one-for-one, but let me verify that to make sure. But the $250,000 was, in theory, calculated based on what that overall amount would be at the time. But let me look into that to make sure.
Okay,
thank
all
you.
right, other questions? Okay, go on.
Page 145 is the KP&F Equalization Fund. This pays for penalty fees for police and fire retirees hired in certain years if their final paycheck is greater than the final 3 years' average salary. This is based on a prior agreement, and it's somewhat of a complicated fund, but I believe this is for police and fire employees hired in like 1990, I believe, somewhere around that period of time. And based on that agreement, we have to pay out a certain percentage to them. And next year, we believe that we'll pay out a little bit more than we have in previous years. And so this is one that will go until the fund is exhausted.
Okay, or those people are retired?
Yes.
Until they're gone. Questions? Seeing none, proceed.
The Neighborhood Revitalization Fund is on page 147. And this supplements the city's infill affordable housing efforts consistent with adopted neighborhood revitalization plans. It is supported by a fee from a rebate from property tax improvements. And this pays for, certain improvements like improvements to the roof to bring it in compliance with the neighborhood plan, or building a porch on certain homes for homes that can't afford those improvements by themselves. And so this rebate program goes into paying for those types of fees.
All right. Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nick, what, can you explain why in 2018, we haven't had any of these, I guess you just have it in contingency, but we haven't really had any expenses out of this, is that correct, for like the last 3 years?
Yeah, and we just kind of budget the contingency in there for if those costs do come up, we have the ability to pay them out. It's not expected that either this year or next year that we'll expend all those funds, so this is one that will be ongoing.
And is there, I mean, so we have this fund set up and this money sitting there, and as I see it, nothing's happened like in the last 3 years with it, is that correct?
Yeah, might ask Bill Feander, the planning director, to come up and address that.
Hi, Councilmember Emerson. This fund is, we haven't really had a plan to deal with the fund the last couple years because it was for infill housing.
I'm sorry, what word did you use? What type of housing?
Infill housing.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, so for the last couple years, we've kind of been working on how do we want to spend this with our infill housing program. So Department of Neighborhood Relations and Planning have kind of been working through some things. So this is by ordinance has to go to that. So I know Sasha's been working on revamping some of the infill housing efforts. So right now, we're working with Habitat and as our main partner right now, and anything that they bring us that we can help them with fit design-wise into a neighborhood plan that in the standards. That's what we're using this fund for. It's just been ramped up recently where we can start using it because we just haven't had any opportunities to use it, to be quite honest. So that's where we see it going right now. And so it's not being spent down very, very quickly, if that helps answer your question.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you, Mayor. I remember us asking about this last year. Yeah, this is what happens when somebody has gotten a subsidy on their, like for Jefferson Square even, which was a big urban renewal project, or some of the other programs that we've had. If they sell their home within a certain time period, then there's money that they owe back to the city, and it just goes into this fund, if I've got it right. And when the staff asked for the authority to put spending the entire balance of this in last year, if I recall correctly, we asked and were assured that if there was a program to be developed, that it would come before the council and we would be consulted, that this wasn't just a fund for staff to spend as things came up. Maybe someone from finance can refresh. That's what I recall as a takeaway last year from budget.
Councilwoman, thank you. I don't recall that discussion specifically, but why don't you let us go back and review the tape from that meeting, and if there is a plan that needs to come before you, we'll make sure that gets addressed.
Thank you, because overall, I mean, almost 400,000 is a lot of money, and it's wonderful that it's accumulated and that we haven't just spent it. And so we've been talking outside these meetings about strategies for infill housing and for leveraging dollars. So it's exciting, no doubt about that. Just wanted to ask. Thank you.
Councilwoman Elisla?
Thank you, Mayor Wilgas. If memory serves me right, and Sasha, just let me know if I'm on the right track. The organization Habitat for Humanity came present with several students in the high schools discussing the program, and it was presented to the council how the partnership was going to work, of working with the infill program and working with Habitat for Humanity and making sure that there were going to be funds available so that there could be revitalization inside of the neighborhoods. So there have been, I think, 2 presentations from Habitat to the council with regards to those efforts.
Okay, all right. Take your word for it.
I don't remember them, but that's okay.
I remember that.
No one remembers.
Any other questions on this? Neighborhood revitalization? Okay.
Page 149 is the Historical Asset Tourism Fund. This pays for the acquisition, rehab, and preservation of historical landmarks. Funding for this came through a 1% allocation of TGT funds, which expired in 2015. And so this is basically kind of budgeting the balance of the cash received through the TGT funds.
And it will be expended in some manner to?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it will be expended all in the next year. I believe some might be spent this year, maybe, I think the total might be $14,000 potentially in anticipated funds this year. But if not, then we're budgeting the estimated beginning balance for 2018.
Well, and that's where they had plans to spend it, and we don't pay for it until they do the project. Right, so that's why the funds are still there.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Questions? Moving on.
Okay.
I'm sorry, do you have a
Well,
question?
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to ask Bill, not to try to go back, but.
Oh, okay.
When was the last time we spent this? This is bothering me, this infill housing on neighborhood revitalization. Because East Topeka South, that was 15, 16 years ago? I don't remember anything after that. And if you need to get back with me, you can, I'm just interested.
Sure, Councilwoman Ortiz, on the NRP, or Neighborhood Revitalization Fund, we have, it's just been accumulating since probably 2008, thereabouts, as this extra percentage we save for on the tax rebates. So it's just been being put in this fund since then. And by ordinance that you've passed through the Neighborhood Revitalization Program, every time we renew that, it's supposed to go to infill housing operated by the city of Topeka, so whatever our programs are.
But my question is, when was the last time that was done?
Yeah,
What year?
It hasn't been expended anything out of that fund for, since its inception, except for this current year. There was a few $1,000s expended, so.
So are you saying since 2008?
Whenever it was, started, 07 or 08, I think is when it started. That does not mean we haven't spent any money on infill housing. It's just out of this fund, yes, that is correct. We have not.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, that makes sense, okay. Didn't mean to go back,
No,
Mr.
that's
Mayor,
fine,
thank you.
good, got it.
And I think I
Okay.
misspoke as well. So just to clarify, that fund we just talked about is from neighborhood revitalization, NRP money.
Yes.
And so the return that I was making reference to when houses are sold and so on is going someplace else. And I don't know if it's in a fund or if it's just going to the neighborhood relations budget. So just,
Okay,
I think I misspoke.
all right. Moving on, past.
Page 155 is our two TIF funds. And we have in there College Hill for $190,000. And also have just a planned budget for the Wheatfield TIF district that has not yet been fully approved by the council, but this is a placeholder for that if and when it does come on.
Okay, questions on the R2 TIF funds? All right, go ahead.
Okay, page 157 are community improvement districts. Those include Holiday Square, 12th and Wanamaker, and the planned community improvement district for the Cyrus Hotel. Each of those are funded by an additional 1% sales tax within the boundaries of the specific district and goes for various improvements within those districts.
Okay, and that came up in our recent discussion about the taxing and tax incentives. Questions? Seeing none?
Okay. Jumping to page 181, so about 24 pages after the CID discussion, is our non-departmental, which is actually part of the general fund. This includes appropriations for items that aren't really attributed to a specific department within the city. That's where there was a question at our first meeting about why that number was negative. That's where we have our vacancy credits, because we don't credit those to a specific department, so that's in there. Prisoner care, which we also talked about at our June 3rd meeting. That is within there. Election costs are included in this, as well as downtown, the downtown revitalization, the downtown revitalization grants and Arts Connect, as well as a few various kind of utilities, again, for areas of the city that aren't attributed to a specific department. Areas of city buildings that aren't attributed to a specific department.
Councilwoman Claire?
I don't even know where I got this, but it's the Downtown Topeka Redevelopment Grant Fund, and it's who received the grants. And it says that grants are provided as reimbursements for permanent improvements to downtown buildings. But when I look through here, there's a lot, Prairie Blaze, to build lofts. And I'm not sure, I think one could argue that a loft is not a permanent improvement. Just like improvements I make to my home, people can come in and change the inside of my home all they want. Just because someone builds a loft doesn't mean that's gonna remain permanent. Can someone verify or explain that, how that helps?
Well, it's.
I mean, facade, yes.
Mr. Mayor, I see Vince Fry sitting behind us, so I'll remind this group that this money is a pass-through that we give to DTI, and they administer the program, so I would like Vince to come up and talk through that a little bit.
Good evening. Councilwoman, we have been wanting to get people to move downtown for years. The demand is far exceeding what we currently have available to us. Many of these buildings that are lofts have been empty buildings for many years that people have purchased with the intent of moving into them after they renovate them. So the whole idea is to get mass in an area to generate economic development opportunities. People living downtown is exactly what we're trying to accomplish. And those lofts, if you had seen them before these grants were offered, many of those buildings sat empty for many, many years. I can tell you for a fact that I've been in some of those that hadn't been occupied in probably 50 years, that someone has come and invested their money to make those things viable again. And to live in them is absolutely a benefit, not only to downtown, but for the entire community.
But if our demand is exceeding, if the demand is exceeding what is down there, why are we paying money to put into lofts? And then when the seller sells that loft, they get the whatever thousands that you give them, plus they get that back as they sell it. Right.
And that
So-
remains there permanently, and their investment that they've made remains there permanently.
So I guess what is wrong or incorrect then is it's not for a structure that's permanently there.
Those are permanently there, yeah.
No, I can go into a loft and change it tomorrow into a business if I wanted.
Well, good, because that, again, once again, is taking something that has not been used in the past and made it into something that people can use. I'll equate that to what's happened with the Assumption Grade School. That sat there vacant for many years as a school, was made into loft apartments. 21 new loft apartments that was not on the tax rolls is now on the tax rolls, priced at about, or assessed at about $1.9 million.
And how much did they get?
From us, they got, I believe, $50,000.
So they wouldn't have done it if they didn't get that?
I can't answer that question, but I can tell you it was very significant in their decision, yes.
So what, Mr. Gerber, how is this like a pass-through? What did you mean it's a pass-through?
Councilwoman, what I mean is this money is in the budget, and then we pass it through
Okay.
to Vince
But the
to
money-
administer the program, and then we have nothing else to do with it.
But the money's in the budget, I guess, to help the redevelopment. But are there, all the, I've been told, all the buildings are sold.
A large majority
And
have
so,
been, yes.
a lot of this money, where's it gonna go now that you are full, or what are we gonna do with this money now?
Well, you grant this to us on an annual basis. We did not have any money granted to us in 2014. So if there's no money, there's nothing to grant.
So there's no money this year?
There is money this year.
Okay, so what
yes.
are you gonna do with this money, since all the buildings and stuff are done or sold downtown?
Just because they're sold doesn't mean that anybody's asked for a grant. There are people that have asked for grants that have purchased buildings, but there are still lots of buildings that have not been developed to a point where they have a project where they're asking for a grant.
But they purchased the building.
Yes.
This doesn't cover it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, now, Councilwoman DeLisa.
Thank you, Mayor Wilgas. I think that the part that's kind of confusing is the whole, the part that's missing in the conversation is that, yes, you can go ahead and rehab, but the committee takes a look at what buildings are vacant and pretty much inhabitable, and the funds then go to make sure that the building, once somebody, for example, if they leave, it's a much more palatable building. It's an investment in our downtown, and it's an investment in our city as well, because what's happening with those buildings is that even though they've been purchased, they haven't been rehabbed. And the funds go specifically for expenses that have to do with the rehab of that building. So when those buildings are rehabbed, they go from not paying taxes because their property values are lower, to you're making an investment in that building, you're augmenting the tax base of that property, you're receiving that money back, and then in case somebody sells the property, now the property is much more attractive, it's got a higher value, so again, it's a return investment back on the community.
Well, I understand that. I was just going off, it says reimbursements for permanent improvements. So that's what I was going off of. I understand all that and why. I was just wondering why it said permanent improvements.
And I think partly again, and just as opposed to temporary improvements. I mean, it's something that's really done a structure, it's a structural change that's made as opposed to putting something in that can be moved out. You know, I think with Goodyear, same way, a permanent investment is something that they couldn't move out easily, or it, not that it wouldn't be changed in the future, but it's something that is, it's done once and it's maybe cemented to the wall or bolted to the wall, the floor or something like that, as opposed to just being temporary.
As we say, if you can pick it up and shake it and it falls out, it's not a permanent improvement. Anything that's permanent is going to be there permanently.
So if I buy one of these lofts, I can't change anything if I purchase it after they get the grant? I can't move the wall, I can't.
Well,
I mean, I don't
if somebody
wanna-
puts in a wall, that wall is going to be there until somebody knocks it down, or we have no idea what that's going to be in the future. I mean, we grant these, and I'm not the person making that decision, there is a grant committee, but they make that decision based on the project and what they know about it and how it will benefit the downtown area.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, Councilman Ortiz?
I was looking at that list, and there's 33 units in North Topeka. That's not downtown.
33 units in, no,
101 North Kansas Avenue.
it's right there
that's-
on the boundary of the Business Improvement District.
But you said it was for downtown.
That is downtown.
That's where 100 North Kansas is south of the river.
Yes, it
It's
is.
next to the bridge.
It's right
It's
next
right
to the
there on
bridge.
First Street.
Yeah, I know, it's always confusing. We have addresses, North Topeka, that's south of the river.
Yeah.
But it's
Somebody,
the
whoever was in
address
charge of
101
whoever did those streets.
The address
did a
was
bad job.
101 North.
Yeah,
It's a big white Seymour, used to be
Yeah.
the Seymour eggplant.
yeah. Councilman?
Thanks. I think that, I'm supportive of this program, but I think Councilwoman Clear raises a couple of points that never were an issue before. It probably is, wouldn't be bad to look at the language in this, you know, sometime in the next few months or a year, in that when this program was created, people were just desperate to get anybody to buy downtown, and there was no, I don't think much of anybody imagined quibbling about some details, you know, like whether you spend it on carpet or not. People would, it's a fixture, but it's short term. People are going to change that out. You know, do you count that or not? Or let's say somebody did buy a building and used this program, and then it was sold, would you use it again? Or is it a one-off for a building? Those kinds of things, I don't think, at this juncture, maybe it's worth looking at again, just to think ahead for some of the what-ifs and make sure that they're really permanent investments and maybe one-time investments. I don't know what the thought is even.
Other questions? Councilman Emerson.
Mr. Gerber, just to clarify, and I don't know if you meant to say a pass-through earlier, but is this money that the downtown property owners pay in and then we get it, which is why you're calling it a pass-through, or is this simply a grant from the city?
Councilman Emerson, thank you. We're getting hung up on words here, I think, pass-through and permanent. Probably pass-through is the wrong word. It's more of a grant from the city. I think the bigger picture issue is this is important for downtown. It's doing exactly what we want to happen in downtown, and that's why we continue to have it in our budget.
May I suggest that maybe what we're saying is, but for, like last week, Jeff White was saying, on some things, but for that being there, maybe this wouldn't have happened, and that's maybe what Mr. Fry's indicating on some of these?
I don't know that they have a specific but-for test, but that's statutorily required in some of our incentives. It's not necessarily in this case.
All right, other questions? Moving on, get to go to cemeteries.
Okay. Yes, page 183. So the city contributes to 4 cemeteries, or 5 cemeteries, the Auburn Cemetery and 2 small family-owned cemeteries, which are required by state law. And then we also have grants with the Topeka Cemetery and the Rochester Cemetery. And that funding has remained consistent. For several years, it comes out of the general fund. And as I understand it, Kansas state law, if a cemetery is not maintained properly, then the city of which it's in has to take over operations for it. And so for 3 cemeteries, that is what the city has to do. And I believe for the other 2, we give them grants so we don't have to take it over.
Any questions? Going on?
Yep. Page 185 is the Topeka Performing Arts Center.
I'm
I have
sorry.
a question.
My
Councilman
mind's
Ortiz.
behind the times. I would hope that we do have a grant writer. Well, I think we do, right? We still have a grant writer. I would hope, Karen got this big old article in the paper about Sumner and blah, blah, blah. Let me throw in my 2 cents with the Topeka Cemetery. We have a vice president out there. And I've talked to Senator Hensley. There's no money in the budget, but I would hope our grant writer would look at, we need streets out there. We need, the NIAs have put that fence up around it, and we poured some of our money over a period of time. But the streets are very terrible, and I don't know if you guys have ever been out there to see who is out there. I'm trying to think, Charles Curtis. It's really beautiful, and it could be something that we could have visitors that would come out there, maybe not as many as going through Sumner as Karen, but I just think it's just something that we just don't really look at and take pride in. And I'd like to see if there's any monies available to upgrade that. I know there was a couple of volunteers that went out and they were scrubbing all the headstones, which are beautiful, but just something to think about. Because there is there's some other people, I'm trying to think who it is out there. There's like 3 or 4
Yeah,
of
the
them.
governors, there are many governors, the original governors
Yeah.
are there, first governors. And I know Keep America Beautiful has a major event out there where they help clean up the cemetery every year.
We do it in May, the
Yes.
3rd weekend in May, Mr. Mayor, and there's
yeah.
so many people that just
Right.
come out, cut grass and stuff.
Right, I've participated. Been there. Yeah, done it.
But
Great.
that cemetery, there's a lot of great people out there that we should be proud of.
Right.
And
Okay.
the streets are just terrible.
Yeah.
It is. It's old and it's terrible. Thank you.
Okay, on cemeteries, moving on.
Page 185 is the Topeka Performing Arts Center. This is also funded through the general fund, and it pays for the utilities, facility improvements, and property insurance for the Topeka Performing Arts Center space, which is part of City Hall Municipal Court. And that is what that funding goes towards.
Any questions? Seeing none?
Page 187 is the Parks and Rec. This is another third of the special alcohol fund that we give to the county for Parks and Rec activities. So again, it's we get the money from the state and then pass through a third of that to the county for Parks and Recreation activities.
Okay, any questions? Go ahead.
Page 193 is the Workers' Comp Fund. This is administered through our Human Resources Department and our Risk Manager. And it is funded through a portion of wages to pay claims on workers' comp injuries.
Questions? None? Go ahead.
Okay, page 197 is the Risk Reserve Fund. And this is simply to reimburse the city for certain insurable losses, and it's funded through just some miscellaneous interest payments that the city receives.
Any questions? Okay.
All right, and the last fund that we have is on page, I didn't actually write that one down, but it is page 199, the Unemployment Compensation Fund. This is funded through a 0.1% rate on employee wages. That's actually a reduction from previous years, and it's just to pay for unemployment costs that come up when someone leaves the city.
That completes the funds. Any questions about any other funds? We've just about covered them all. Councilwoman Claire.
Wake up. Did we talk about fleet fund last time?
I think we did earlier when we had the Public Works, but did you have a question there?
Yes, actually. Page 166.
166.
The education and travel, what do they utilize? 20,000.
So on the education and travel, part of the job requirements of our mechanics is to achieve their ASI Master Technician certifications. So that applies kind of to the general vehicles. We also have special training required for the fire fleet garage, basically to certify and train those guys to work on the fire fleet apparatus equipment.
But are these like new? I mean.
So we have had
like
some
every year?
turnover,
Oh.
yes, in staff, new staff, and basically, I mean, that's the result of the change in that budget.
And what about drugs and lab? What do they have drugs and lab for at the fleet fund? It's only like $300.
54,300.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that is for drug testing of employees. Basically, you know, as we do the randomized testing, or if we have an incident with an employee, they have an accident or something like that, the required testing.
Does everybody have that in every budget or just fleet?
I believe it's in most of the departments, if not all.
It is?
But we'll go
Okay.
back and look at that.
And the repair parts, I understand, but then you have materials and supplies, which is 23,000. What are materials? It's 600.
Let me get to my. And what line item again, Councilwoman?
600.
So those are materials and supplies that we use within the shop for repair of, the vehicles and/or equipment.
So what's this repair parts? On 54800. I guess I was trying to figure out the difference.
The 54800, non-motor vehicle equipment, so we also do repairs of small equipment. The example that comes to mind is our street patch truck. We have a vibratory roller. We have two-cycle engine type equipment. And
they
so
do that.
just accounting for those in two separate line
So
items.
they do that, like not maintenance? The fleet does that?
So we are responsible as fleet for a lot of the equipment repair, not just vehicle repair. That's why we have the heavy-duty shop down at the streets facility, as well as the fire fleet shop adjacent to fire admin. And then, of course, adjacent to this building is our main admin that does the majority of the vehicles, as well as outfitting, say, the new police cars and things like that as they come in.
Okay.
Okay, good. Any other questions on funds?
Yes?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm switching funds now. Okay, on the social services programs, on the youth employment program,
What page?
last page, 190, oh, no, it's not, 190. So we have 11 kiddos, so that's about $4,500 per kiddo. And are we tracking any outcomes? How do we know this program is working? Or is providing services?
Jackie Russell's helping administer that, so she's on her way up.
I guess I don't know much about this program.
Would you like me to maybe tell you a little bit about how we have the program structured as a starting point?
I mean, I know they apply and I know they get chosen, then what?
So then we have, I refer to them as sponsor departments that make us aware of position summaries that fit within the age criteria of the youths.
Okay, so just in the
Just in the city only.
So not in partnerships with other local agencies?
Not at this time.
Oh, okay.
So they are primarily doing clerical and administrative tasks within several departments this summer based on the age demographic of the employees who applied for the program and were selected. They work 30 hours a week in the departments, and then of the 8-week program, 4 Mondays they will do professional development training. We have partnered with the library to come in, and they are providing Microsoft Office training in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint for them. We have also partnered with a facilitator from Washburn Tech, Kim Doherty, and she's doing some workplace training with them. Conflict resolution was the class that they had this past Monday, and she'll be doing about 4 sessions with them. We also have some EAP training on problem solving that they've been going through. And so what we're trying to do is help them be in a professional work environment and do meaningful work within the departments, and then supplement that preparation with some professional development training on the 4 Mondays during the 8-week program.
Do we know if this, do we have outcomes that we've tracked? Do we know if it's successful?
So when you say successful, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
So I would tell you that based on last summer's program, we hired 11 last summer, and 10 of the 11 completed the entire employment for the entire program. And so I call that successful because they were able to stay for the duration of the program, and they walked away with more skills than what they came in with. And so that is my measure of success, if they have gotten that positive feedback from the employer, the supervisor in the departments, and we've been able to give them some tangible training that they can stick with them as they develop their careers.
So this work program are only for those students or kiddos that want to go into city work or clerical work. I mean, how are they going to get? My research, when I read about what all the other cities do, most other cities have this partnership with local agencies, and you ask kiddo, where do you want to go? I want to go to nonprofit, so they go to nonprofit, and somebody wants to be a wellness trainer. And so we actually put them where they want to be, but most of the cities then fund that. So I'm just wondering,
So to some extent, we try to do that with what is available within city employment. It's also trying to plant a seed of an idea of working in public service. So we do use it as a potential future recruitment tool, because a lot of people don't realize what careers there are within public service. So that's one aspect of it. Anticipation of future opportunities to partner with other organizations is something that we would like to explore as the time is right. Certainly wanting to be able to match with career interest would be ideal. So we work with what we have internally at this moment and try to match their interests as best as possible.
and do you think the 4,500 per kiddo, I guess if you had to break the 50,000 down more, how much is being spent on, where's the 50,000 going? Where's the 4,500 per kiddo going?
Well, their pay is ranging from $8 to $10 an hour based on the type of assignment, and then there are some employer Medicare, Social Security fees that we have to pay in that. We provide them uniforms so that they are easily identified while they are working within the city employment, so that's a portion of it. The training, we do have to pay for that facilitated training, and so, for example, the library is charging $250 a session, so there's some training expense, and then we do provide them lunch on those 4 Mondays, and we try to keep that within the $150 to $200 range per lunch. We try to be very economical, but those are some of the ancillary administrative fees that go along with the program. But I would tell you a bulk of it is the pay that goes to the employees that are hired.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on funds? Councilman Emerson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nick, on the unemployment compensation fund on page 200, I recall, I think Brandon last year changed that rate departments were paying, but I do wonder, can you explain what the other pay claims and damages are? As I understand it, the city of Topeka, you participate in the Kansas Unemployment Compensation Fund, is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're paying a certain percentage on the first $8,000 of earnings of each employee? Yes, that is, trust me,
Okay.
Yeah, first quarter I always hate. Anyway, so what are the other pay claims and damages? Because I guess I don't understand that. Do you know off the top of your head?
I mean, Jackie can speak about the program, but that's where we actually charge, when we have to make those payouts, that's the line item we charge it to.
And Councilman, Jackie just reminded me that we don't participate in that. We're self-funded.
Oh.
We're self-funded.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And so this year, that 130, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no, yeah.
So that's 130,000 this year, that's just a worst-case scenario, that's,
Yeah.
That is a worst-case scenario. We did reduce that mid-year last year as our 2010 reductions in force. The time frame that they were eligible for unemployment had expired, and the fund was growing more rapidly because we had to increase that rate based on the layoffs that we had. So we've reduced it down to that worst-case scenario to make sure that there's ample funding to cover, but we pay each quarter based on actual expenses incurred for unemployment.
okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilman Hiller?
Could we go back to the workman's comp fund? We scooted kind of there at the end.
What page?
It's on page 193 and 194. The question is, I guess, that there's a lot of money in that fund, and it looks like, for most of us in workplaces, workman's comp is something you hope won't happen, and if it does, you've got your fund to pay it. Looks like here we are putting a lot of money into it just in case we need it, but we're also funding one full-time employee.
Our risk program manager, Shannon Langston, her salary is charged to the work comp fund.
So, and does she work all of her time on workman's comp, or could you just describe that a
Absolutely.
little bit?
Yes. It's a pretty busy job. So Shannon, we actually in 2012 hired Corbell as our claims administrator, but we also eliminated a nurse position and a safety coordinator position. And so Shannon serves as the safety coordinator as well as the risk manager, and spends a lot of her time out with the department. She attends all of the department safety meetings. She also administers the vehicle and the property insurance for the city. So vehicle has also got a lot of activity in looking at accidents and repairs and working with different insurance companies. With the departments, we are trying to help with a more safety focus, looking at accidents, could they be prevented? She works with the safety consultants. We also have, for our property, traveler's insurance comes in and does periodic inspections. The state of Kansas comes in and inspects our facilities, and Shannon is the coordinator of all of that, as well as the claims administration piece that she has Corbell assisting with.
Thank you.
Okay, any other? Councilwoman Claire.
On the, I'm done with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can run. Page 169 on the facilities maintenance fund, I see their education and travel went from $500 to $5,000. I was just wanting to know the reason for that. Page 169.
Page 169. And you know what line is that? What is that?
52300.
52300 is the account. That's about the fifth or sixth line down, I believe.
So as we discussed at the previous meeting about asset management and how we're building asset management programs for our facilities, we increased training dollars, basically to train these guys in maintenance and operations of the equipment that we take care of, whether it be the chillers. A lot of that work we contract out, so the thought process there being if we can increase the training, maybe we don't have to contract out.
So how many people were there? Just so I don't have to look, or do you have to look?
I have to look. I have 171 employees, so.
So this is like starting from scratch, nobody knows anything about this, and we're trying to train them?
No, ma'am, I wouldn't say that we're starting from scratch. We do have a number of new employees that have come into the division, but the other thing to think about is building technology change, building pieces to systems, just staying on top of the type of equipment that we have to maintain.
That's just a big jump. That's $4,500.
Well, but, I would say we haven't had a training program in facilities prior. So while it may seem like a large jump going from nothing to something, that's what we think is adequate.
Spread over 20 employees as well.
20? Okay,
Okay,
thank
all
you.
right. It is.
Plus, we're changing out some of our major equipment this
Yeah.
year, correct?
Yes.
If we're through with the funds, I'm going to suggest we take a break before we go into the next section. But council, we have a heavy decision to make. Next Monday, our special council meeting to discuss the city manager process. We moved here because the planning commission is using the council chamber. They have canceled their meeting because of not having some things ready to do it, no matter what. So now we have a choice between either council chamber or here. This is nice, and it's informal, and it's everything, but the other is much easier for television and for the,
It's going to be
well, we have to go on television to open the meeting and to close it. And also that said that it is probably more secure than this room, but it's your choice. We can go either place. So we'll vote LEC or council chamber. Those who want to go to the council chamber, raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's it. Those who want to stay at the LEC, we have 2. We're going to be at the council chamber, 5:30 Monday night. And we'll inform our other members. Question?
I just wanted to say that we wouldn't have to pay security if we were here,
Okay.
and we have to pay those guys to be out there. That's why I looked at that.
Okay, that's another reason. Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break about, and then we'll go into the next item.
Security amendments. Think of it.
Well, we will call the meeting back to order. As is noticed that we have lost a council member. There are only 7 council members here now. It takes 6 to pass any amendment or to take any action. Since there's only, that would be almost unanimous. Rather than go through the process that maybe then we would be changing votes on the agenda for Tuesday evening. It's a reasonably short, always dangerous to say that, council agenda, so that there was time that we could handle any other budget items if necessary. And in talking to city manager, agrees that I think we end the meeting tonight and then prepare on Tuesday night that we will consider amendments. And then they are brought into they made a part of the budget that is brought back to us then on the July 11th. Now, would you speak to that? Is that what your thinking is, and anything else we need to clarify there?
Mr. Mayor, that sounds accurate from what we've discussed. Anyone who wants to make an amendment Tuesday should simply do so, and then there can be a vote on that, and then that's incorporated into the budget document. And then you will be able to look at that final document then, as Ms. Lee notes, on July 11th, an entirely separate ordinance, an entirely separate something to consider, and so there could be changes again at that point because it's something brand new. But we would intend to have those amendments Tuesday to be incorporated into the final budget.
And on the 11th is when we set the ceiling, which is a pro forma, doesn't really, we still move the budget's moving around, but we set the ceiling that we have to set in for publication, and we set the public hearing.
Yes, yep, both of those things.
All right. Councilman Hill.
Just for the benefit of people in the audience, we've changed our dates and our procedure a little bit. Could you go ahead and follow that through for the rest of this calendar to finish the budget?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I believe
Through
that
August.
Just so we
if
kind
you're
of got the
following along,
checkpoints.
I believe it's page 8, I want to say, of the budget document. Has the calendar, which is also available on our website. But yeah, the dates we've spoke about, July 11th, setting the maximum taxes levy, and then setting the public hearing for adopting the budget, which we have on our calendar, August 8th for the mandatory public hearing, and then formally adopting the budget on August 15th.
Thanks, I just wanted to clarify
Yeah, that's
that
good.
as much for the audience.
And
as
that's assuming there is no election, that we're not
Yes.
increasing the mill levy to the extent that we have to take it to a vote of the people. Councilman Ortiz.
Will you let us know, on this schedule, it says city receives final revenue estimates from the county and the state. Will you email us and let us know that as soon as you know?
We can make that part of the overall message on Tuesday's discussion.
Okay, good.
Well, I mean, tomorrow's the 15th, right?
But I think you have to go through some,
Councilwoman, we will, as Nikki said, we'll make sure we incorporate that into Tuesday evening's discussion. We have some numbers, but we're looking at them and trying to understand what they mean for the budget moving forward.
So we can't find out before Tuesday?
We could certainly give you that information as well.
That would be good.
I mean, I'd like to have it before Tuesday, if I could have it before Tuesday.
okay, other business. other items? Sorry to have so much free time this evening. No, being no further business before the body, we are adjourned. Here, were you walking your? Yes. You want to share that?